Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today. We're going to be looking at lesson 9 and a couple of items on that exercise we're going to look at, but the main one is going to be our Zone 1 design. So let us take a peek at what we have coming up here. I will just share my screen. There we go. Oops, I'm not there yet. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so zone 1 or lesson 9 assignment is we're getting to the final part of the course, and we'll just do a quick review of this lesson's assignments. The first one is a building survey, and that's worth 4 points. So obviously that is not a big part of the exercise. So what we really want to dial into is that Zone 1 integrated design. And that, of course, is worth 14. And the building survey is pretty straightforward. It's really just dialing into what local materials were used in the past and what we can learn from that, and how some of those materials might be really useful today. And then we jump into that Zone 1. So let's just take a look at an example of the building survey, just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of that. Again, there are examples here. If you want to take a look, you go onto the OSU platform and you click on the modules menu on the left here, and that takes you to a number of different headings. But the one thing that's great here under resources is the sample student report. So that's always a good place to take a look at if you have any questions about the format or what other people have done, basically. Okay, so again, the building survey here. This student resides in British Columbia, Canada here, not too far from where I live. So their focus was on the coastal Salish people. And there's some nice images here and a little bit of a description about some of the materials they used. And obviously Western red cedar was a big part of that, and still is. I mean, it's a sought after lumber in this part of the world, and very much rot resistant, long lasting, a little less strong than Douglas fir, but yeah, beautiful wood. And then of course we have our building survey SWOT analysis. So that just sort of walks you through that. And again, the building survey is a small part of this assignment. So, you wouldn't want to sort of disproportionately spend too much time on it versus the Zone 1 design that we're going to be looking at. So with that, we have some good resources here. We have a little video here from Andrew, just touching on the different zones, so you can take a look at that. But of course, Zone 1 is that inner core. So that's going to be your closest zone in terms of around your human activity areas. That could be the house, that could be an outbuilding. There's some students that were designing in public spaces. So in that case, there may be some buildings present, or you may have to put in a proposed building. But that Zone 1, of course, is that inner core, and it is, I would say a big part of how permaculture design differs from our traditional landscape design. We're really trying to improve the efficiency of our activities on a site, and that just yield, yields a better result in terms of maintenance and just the whole way a site is laid out. And a good example of this is we had a client a couple of years ago that in an initial site visit, they had a chicken coop, which is a wonderful thing to see in a on a site. And I'm trying to remember how big the site was. It was probably an acre and a half, 2 acres. So it was a nice size. And they had an existing landscape that wasn't really working for them. But the one thing that really jumped out was that this chicken coop was at the far end of the property. So they had to travel about 300 feet to go and let the chickens out and then to go check eggs. So for us, we go 2 or 3 times a day to check in on our chickens, and um, having it that far away just doesn't make any sense. So that's just one example. But yes, the Zone 1 is a very interesting space to design. And we've got a little bit of a layout here on some of the elements that we're looking for. So within the template file that you're using, we want to have a goal, right? So we want to specify a goal for that. We want to include, of course, a map of the Zone 1. And often what people will do is put their base plan within that drawing and then do a little bit of a, well, let me show you an example of that. There we go. So this is an example of what I'm talking about, the base plan showing the whole property, and then Zone 1 is indicated here in that orange box, and then highlighted here, and then some images. So that's a nice way of showing it. And that, of course, is the existing conditions we're looking at. Okay, and we're going to specify general patterns you're designing, specific strategies, and then we're going to jump into a couple of other items as well. We want to look at water management plan. So often in that Zone 1, we have impervious surfaces that we can manage. It's a resource that's often um, you know, definitely worth considering reusing that water and or some sort of control with the stormwater. If currently the runoff from, say, a patio or a roof surface of a house was causing some drainage concerns, this is a great opportunity to do some stormwater management to get it away from the house, but also benefit the landscape. So those are a couple things you'd want to keep in the back of your mind. We want to know how the water flows on the property and how that's going to be diverted to assist your landscape. And there's a number of different strategies one could use. I won't say typically, but often if the site has the topography for it, putting a rain garden in an urban landscape is often a wonderful way of reusing water coming off the roof. That's just one example. On larger sites, of course, we can look at other things, and this sort of either on contour or off contour swale is one way, but we can slow water down and have it sink into the site. So that is actually a really big piece within the Zone 1 design, is that water management. And we just have to go through a couple of crazy summers like the last couple have been, where we're getting lots of heat. And you realize that there's a lot of resources hitting our project sites. And often we can reuse that within the landscape rather than going the traditional approach of draining and then pumping water back in when we need it. So, and certainly with the work that we do, water, well, we do a water layer rather than a specific zone 1 design. We're doing an overall design, and zone 1 is included, but the water really does drive the landscape and what you can do with it. So big highlight for that. And then, of course, your proposed plan. So what is your zone 1 going to look like? What's your concept for that? In response to microclimates and some of the elements that you want to include. And it can be it's meant to be quite conceptual, right? So we don't really have to worry about adding, a huge amount of detail. An example of that might be a rain garden or sending water into cisterns. You don't have to detail all that out. But on a concept basis, we want to see, a cistern in place and some logical way water is going into it. Yeah, so again, that is just a little overview of the integrated zone 1 design. We have some resources here that are on the page, and there's a rubric here that I encourage everybody to look at as they're putting together their assignment, because this is what I use in terms of providing feedback and grading your assignments. So let us take a look at an example here. So again, this is zone 1 assignment from a previous student, and there may be slight changes if you do go into the course module section and look at these sample reports. There's 4 of them currently. If you look at those, they may be slightly different than your template file, and that is mainly because the template files get fine-tuned with each course. So at the end of each course, if there's something that we feel needs to be upgraded or changed, it is done so, but these previous reports may not reflect that. Okay, that is the master. We'll go to Michael's example here. So again, the first sheet, we're looking at existing conditions, and that would include the base plan. And if you can add some images, that's very helpful for anybody looking at your drawing. We also want to hear about the goal. So within that zone 1, what's the idea? What are you trying to achieve? And some patterns. So it's a little bit of an ambiguous term, and occasionally people will get confused with that. But patterns that are given in this example is just increasing shade, screening, and trying to sink water, so slow water down as it runs through that zone 1, and create a vista. So that's certainly repeated in the strategies. So the patterning itself, again, can be a little bit tricky. If we go to our template file, let's see if we have a good explanation on that. And of course, if we are using this template file and we zoom out a little bit, we can then see any of the examples and or tutorials that might be included here. Again, here's the natural capital database that you might find helpful. And we've got a little bit on some patterns, and I wouldn't get too hung up on here, but there are some examples here of what others have done and how they've approached that. And again, the patterning can be really broad. And then we get into your water strategies here. So again, the template file is a great resource if you're looking for some assistance. And again, there's examples built within that. And we go back to Michael's example. So again, we're still in existing conditions. And then we get to our proposed water management. So some of the strategies here are micro irrigation, creating shade, a swale, and gray water. And then there's a nice little image there about some of the benefits a swale can provide. And then that is all part of the drawing here with a gray water option. If the gray water is not being directed into a specific system out into the landscape, you can still collect it under your sink. We do this just with buckets, and you can place it outside during the summer months. We're quite lucky in British Columbia here with that composting toilets and gray water systems are now part of the BC building code. So they're something that can be added to a new home build. So you definitely want to check your area to see if this is allowable, if you're planning to include it. And then we get to the proposed plan. So if we back up a bit, we're focused on water here. And in the next sheet, we're focused on the overall plan itself. So this student has gotten quite specific with what plants he intends to introduce. And you can see that they're in color and that the existing plants are grayed out. So that's a really nice way of showing existing versus proposed, is to gray out existing and to add some color into those proposed. You can also see he has made an effort here to take advantage of some microclimates by putting in a Myers lemon in the corner here. So in this part of the world, this plant is certainly doable. It's just you're pushing the envelope a little bit, as well as apricots. You know, to be successful with those, they need to have a specific microclimate. And then, of course, some screening here and a legend, two legends, one for the plants and one for the base plan itself, and then all the pertinent site information below it. So beyond that, there are some images, some considerations. I really like this approach. If somebody is considering swales in a smaller landscape, you know, one disadvantage of them is they create, you know, well, I won't say a hazard. They could be a hazard in the landscape, but they may or may not be full of water. Often putting a wood chip, filling them with wood chips is a great way to go. We've done that before in the past, and not only put wood chips in there, but we put perforated pipe at the bottom. And you can take this one step further and have this be your access path. So you might have a wood chip path that also doubled as a swale that's holding water. So there's sort of stacking functions, so to speak. So yeah, just some nice examples here. And this is a nice image just showing what the intent is to screen this view. And then the SWOT analysis. So during this exercise, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats that sort of came out during that process? So that is pretty straightforward. And then, of course, you can ask questions or provide feedback. And that is about it for that example. I don't think there's any questions on the Google document here. Does anybody have any questions on the call that, relating to zone 1 or basically anything that we've encountered or hope to encounter with the course here? Okay, so everybody's doing pretty well. I can, maybe what I'll do, we have a few minutes here. I can just quickly show you what we've been up to on our property in the last few weeks. That does tie into the whole zone 1 approach. We've been, after 25 years of being on our property and having designed and installed numerous concepts within our landscape. This year we brought in an excavator and basically cleaned the slate, and we are rebuilding from the ground up. I'll just get some images here to show you what we're doing. Yeah, I'll just share screen here. All right, so this is our part of our zone 1, and it's an outdoor kitchen area we're putting in. We're doing an off-grid outdoor kitchen, and we've got the structure in place. Now we just have to get all of our lovely cooking accessories in here, and picture my wife cooking an inaugural barbecue in there. But we're going to get a wood-fired oven and barbecue for that area, so that's lots of fun. And what you can't see in here is there's a bunch of raised beds, raised planter boxes with annual vegetables in it. Yeah, that's some of our winter garden right now. We've got lots of kohlrabi. Now this was an area that it's the main part of our work, actually. This used to be a lovely pond and patio area. And in all fairness, it's probably zone 2, not zone 1. It's our house is just to the left here. You can't see it, but this was a huge undertaking. We took probably about 15 years ago. We built this. So over time, the last few years, we've noticed that the pond needed some renovation. And we had an invasive plant in there that we planted, an aquatic plant we purchased that went sideways on us. And the way we built this pond is it was a lined pond. We put cobble and rock in it and then planted into that gravel, which normally works really well if you put the right plants in there. So we did put one in that got away on us, and we tried to control it, but because it had embedded itself in all the cobble, it was basically impossible to fix. So we ripped out the pond and we ripped out the patio, and we had intended on placing an irrigation pond here. We're hoping to hold 50, 60,000 gallons of water. We got started with a test dig. Let me see if we can. No, I don't have any of that, but we did a little bit of a test dig here, and we ran into some hard pan quite early. So we could have brought in a larger machine and gone ahead and got the depth we wanted. We wanted to try and get an average of about 6 feet of depth, but I was a little bit hesitant to do that, mainly because of its proximity to the house in our zone 1 and an irrigation pond. I don't know if many of you have seen what they typically look like, but they're not the most beautiful element in the landscape. However, when you need water, they're fantastic. But through the year, the water level drops, and they're not geared for frogs or aquatic life because they're meant to be drained through the year. So what we decided to do is excavate this out a little further and put in an infiltration basin. Now, let me just get to the next photo here if it works. Not sure why that is not. There we go. So yeah, we dug it out a bit more. Won't bore you with all these, but you know, we have a leveler here that made it a lot easier. And we got a bit closer. And this is what we basically ended up with as our prepped area. So we have, it's really a giant rain garden. So we have a flat lower section. And typically in a rain garden, there's different zones, much like a permaculture landscape. So zone 1 is the bottom, and that is often a very wet zone that can be submerged periodically through the winter. And then as you go up the side of the rain garden, you hit zone 2, which is a zone that's not submerged, but it's plants that enjoy a higher level of moisture. And then the very top, zone 3, is a xeriscape zone. It doesn't have access to that water. So instead of just making this all flat and steeply sloping it, we've intentionally made a huge bench for zone 2, because this is where we want to plant we have a whole bunch of autumn olive and, sort of moisture loving large shrubs that enjoy some space as well as moisture that we can come and harvest during the year. So we've got a wide range of plants sort of allocated for this outer rim. And during the peak flow in the winter months, the water will come up to the top of this catch basin here. And that's basically it's about 9 inches it'll allow for about 9 inches of flooding in the basin itself. So let me just we brought some topsoil in, and you can see we're starting to backfill in here, and we probably got 16 inches of topsoil in the base. Oops. And there's my wife Angela spreading soil. And we're getting near completion here. Took quite a bit of soil. Oh, and of course, this is the vital piece in the whole works, is that overflow. We need to control that water if we get a surge in there. And then what we did was we have a low spot near our house where we park our vehicles that we put a catch basin in and plumbed that water along with access from a ditch into this rain garden. Well, we'll call it a rain garden. So we ended up terminating the piping here, and we have sort of a swale between the end of the pipe and the beginning of this infiltration area. And there's our catch basin. I'm going to actually put another one here after the weekend's rain. We need one more. And these are much the same, but I'm not sure if I've got an updated version. No, we've planted the bottom of that. Oh, that's too bad. I thought I had updated those images. Yeah, well, I'll try and find that on my phone. It should be here. I'll just send it to my computer and that should help us out. And I ran into a little challenge and I'd like to show you guys that. So it's always good to learn as we go here. All right. All right, it's just on another screen. Uh-oh. There we go. So here is that basin planted. And what we've done is we've selected a number of sedge. Okay, these are all plants that love high levels of moisture, along with the red Osler dogwood. Okay, so that's a native dogwood in our area. And then these are native sedges to BC. And then these are a cultivated hybrid that has more of a blue-green foliage, but they're all very well suited. So you can see here where our challenge was. I didn't get this armored or filled with rock prior to our first rain event. And so I got a little bit of erosion and we kind of fixed up this top part. We retained the uphill side of that slope and backfilled that with soil. And then we got in there and got some rock in there to reduce the erosion once it hits the rain garden. When it was back here, and you can see the proximity to the house here, and but that is an essential part, is getting some erosion control going on. Yeah, so there we have it. We got some water flowing in after a big wind. As you can see, a pot got blown in there. But what I have to do now is get mulch placed on that soil, which ideally would have happened before the rain. It's going to be a little trickier now. And then get this outer area planted. That's what I'm hoping to do this week, but we're getting pretty good flow, and that's just coming from the drain off of my driveway. We haven't started to access water from the ditch here because it hasn't really started to flow yet, but when it does, we'll probably get some good pooling here. So the whole idea of this is twofold. We want water to infiltrate into the ground, and when it does so, I don't think there's a good image showing you this, but you can see here beyond our land slopes away, and we have a number of fruit trees downhill. So this structure is going to be benefiting our landscape below, right? And it'll have zero impact on the house that is at a higher elevation, as you can see over here. Right, so it's a combination of flood proofing and drought proofing. This planting here probably will never need any irrigation. What we do in zone 2 might need a little bit of irrigation during the first couple of years, but then once that is established, it'll have access to some of this water that's being held within the soil itself. So yeah, that's just a little snapshot of what we have been up to. But that work is slowing down because of our weather shifting on us, that's for sure. So yeah, yeah, is there anything anybody would like to share with us at the moment?
I got a question on your pond, Mr. Wallace.
Sure.
Is there's no liner in that pond, correct? That one that you just had in the photo. no liner in that pond. It's going to collect the water. Is there enough like clay in your soil that's just going to hold it long enough for you, or are you guys that wet that you constantly have that much water in there being held throughout the year?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. This is actually what we're doing is we've shifted away from a lined pond. We used to have a liner in there and fish and frogs. It was a great ecological little element. And now we have no liner, and we're not that is not actually a pond anymore. That is really a large rain garden. So what happens is all our storm water is going to go in there, and when it's abundant, it'll end up flooding, so it'll sit on top of the soil.
Mm.
But we're encouraging that water to infiltrate into the ground below and head down the slope
Oh,
to our
I see.
orchard, which you can't see in those images, but that section of our orchard is very, very dry during the summer months.
Uh,
So it suffers a little bit in drought. So now we're hoping that literally the thousands of gallons that we're infiltrating into the soil are going to benefit those trees.
it's gonna all gonna
Uh,
go down.
mhm. Yeah, so a bit of a change for sure. We're still going to do a small ecological pond elsewhere, but the positioning of that existing or the older pond was such where we could pull off of the house, off of our roof, off of our house, and put it in there. We can come off of the driveway that we get flooding happening, and then we can also pull it out of our ditch. So there's these three components that we can utilize within that. Now we collect rainwater for reuse in cisterns, but when they are filled, because we've got about 15,000 gallons of storage in cisterns. So when they're filled, uh, they will go into the rain garden. Yeah.
So then back to the pond. If you're doing pond to hold water, have you had experience with doing like a full clay bottom versus doing the liner?
You know,
Um,
yeah, I have not installed a pond like that, mainly because, well, where we are, we're a sandy loam and very, very rapid draining. If we pour water on the soil, it goes for the most part. But about a kilometer or half mile from where I live, a friend of mine is in a lower his land sits lower in the landscape than ours. We're probably, 60, 70 feet higher. He has beautiful clay and he can dig a pond, no liner, no worries.
and hold.
Which he has done. Um, and he can hold water pretty well. So you have to have about 30% clay content in your soil for that to happen. And that's not a guarantee, but it's enough to start sealing up nicely versus having to to use a liner. And I really don't for what we were trying to do, a liner would benefit frogs and damselflies and the aquatic elements, but just beyond the liner, it's bone dry.
Mm.
So again, our original thought was an irrigation pond to pump from, but we shifted gears and ended up going with we call it an infiltration basin, but I mean, it's really a rain garden. It's just a very large one. Um, and we made it about as large as we could. Yeah, could
What's
have.
the diameter on it?
We're about say 20 by 40,
Okay.
somewhere in there, plus or minus. And it'll be very interesting to see how it behaves because we've installed rain gardens in urban settings before, and you really never know how they're going to behave until the water starts flowing,
Mm.
because there's a lot of different dynamics. There's the subgrade, how that is going to um, accept the water coming in. Um, we did a rain garden earlier this year for a client, and as we were excavating it, this beautiful sandy loam, and then boom, we hit clay and we hit water. So we were
Oh,
dealing with, okay, well, that's great. We've got a little vein of water coming into the, very slowly coming into the rain garden at a low level, a low depth. But in the winter, we thought, oh my, this is just going to turn into a really unfortunate situation with water. It'll be full of water the whole winter. So in that case, we put a bottom drain in it. And it's not something we would often do. I can actually show you here. I got some images of that one. But honestly, this is one of the passive rainwater harvesting strategies that is often overlooked. So this is the inlet on that rain garden. You can see we have to put rock and some cobble in there just to prevent um, washouts. This is very early in the project. Okay. What I need to do is find what I'm going to do is just back out of that a second. Sorry, I get to bore you with all my images here.
I like I like the images.
Okay. Oops. Picture of my dad. Yeah, I may not have the images on this. Let's see if we can, darn. Don't really see it. But in this photo, we see, we've got all this irrigation infrastructure being put in. So we try and ignore that, but we have our catch basin. So we set our flooding height, the maximum pooling height, and we set that there. You can see there's a white pipe sticking out of the ground here, and that is because we have a drain going through the bottom of the rain garden. And as that drain exits, I'm not sure if I have an image of that. Oh, there we go. There's a drain and drain rock below the fabric here, and we're just backfilling. And we have a valve at the very end of it. So in the summer, the valve is closed. And then as we get into this time of year, we open that valve so we can relieve any water pressure that starts to build in that system. And then that is it after backfill. And we cut this down and we put what is called a clean out fitting on the end so that you could take that fitting off and clean out the drain if you ever had to. Unlikely it ever would need it. So this landscape ended up with a rain garden and then a lawn alternative, kind of a clover lawn, and then on the right here, there's a larger planting. Yeah, don't know if I have. Yeah, and then we went through using a broad fork to break up all the compaction that we created. And some other image. This is something we did the year previous on the back of the property. It's a lot of hardscape, but a mixture of edible, ornamental, and medicinal plants. But this is the initial planting that we did. And I went back there a couple weeks ago, and it's I don't know if I took pictures when I went back there, but it is it's filled in really nice. So that's one of the things we do when we build soft landscape is we make sure we have a really good soil depth, and we add a really nice compost product after we have planted it. So right after this, we come in and we add composted mulch, which looks like we had done that by then. Yeah, so there's my spinach. Yeah, so there's our little poly house. Got a little poly house there. We're all about with our homestead. We grow 95% of our own vegetables, so a big part of our time goes into uh,
Um,
food production. And don't know if there's any other items here. Yeah, nothing too. Yeah, tons of images. So anyhow, I hope that answers your question. Anything else we can help you out with today?
no, that's it. I'm just curious about that. It's gonna,
Yeah, yeah, no problem. Okay. Um, don't know if I have another rainwater example. Here you go. So that same project, this is just after compost has been applied, and that is after we've filled the rain
Mhm.
garden. So, and in this case, zone one is predominantly what's going on here because we needed to make the base as large as possible. We have, we're our calculations were our collection surface versus our rain garden basin. This is about 10% of what we're collecting. So, and then zone two is right up on the edge here, just as we're coming up. All right. Oh, a little bit of more context, but it's a small urban project. And of course, we broad fork the subgrade here, added compost-based soil, and then um, seeded that. Yeah. So anyhow, that's a little bit of information, what's going on my end. And if there are no other questions today, I think we'll terminate the meeting, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody's work next week. And if you have any challenges you run into during the week, don't hesitate to drop me a note or a question. I'll be keeping my eyes open. And yeah, again, well, happy to see your work next week. All right, everybody. Well, you take care and have yourself a great week. And again, don't hesitate to drop me a note if you run into any challenges.
You got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.